Okay, let's dive right in. For the longest time, we all kind of thought of the internet as this single, borderless world. But that whole idea is being deliberately torn apart. The global network is being fractured. And believe me, it is not happening by accident.
Yeah, this quote from the source material just hits the nail on the head. This isn't some bug in the system. It's a calculated geopolitical strategy. We're talking about nations actively trying to claim digital territory.
And to really grasp how serious this is, we've got to look at this wild experiment that, honestly, most of the world completely missed.
So, let's rewind the clock to December 2021. Something pretty major is going down inside Russia's digital borders.
For hours, Russia was testing a national kill switch. The whole point was to see if they could actually unplug their entire country from the global internet and still have it work on its own.
So this self-contained Russian internet has a name, the RUNET. And look, while the test wasn't perfect, it proved a massive point. This wasn't just some tech drill. It was a powerful statement of doctrine. It showed that the dream of a state-controlled, self-sufficient internet was actually possible.
And here's the thing. Russia is absolutely not alone in thinking this way. What we're actually seeing is this global showdown between three major powers, and each one is pushing a totally different and frankly incompatible vision for the future of the internet. Now, what's so fascinating about this slide is how it just lays out the whole conflict. On one side, you've got the US model, a free and open internet, mostly led by private companies. Then you have China's sovereign internet, where the state controls digital space just like physical land, and they're exporting that model through their digital Silk Road. And then there's the EU. They say they want openness, but they use their huge market as a weapon to set global rules with things like GDPR. That's their big data privacy law. So you've got three totally different philosophies fighting for control of the same network.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. While all these big ideas are clashing out in the open, the real fight, well, that's happening almost entirely out of sight.
Right, because we're all glued to the headlines, and it's so easy to think that's where the whole story is.
All the talk about TikTok getting banned or countries kicking Huawei out of their 5G networks. And yeah, that stuff is definitely part of the picture, but it's not even close to the whole story. Because the real, honest-to-goodness power struggle is happening behind closed doors. It's in these super obscure technical committees and boring policy forms that most of us have never ever heard of.
We're talking about places like the International Telecommunications Union. These are the places where the actual rules of the internet get written. And this is exactly where countries like China are playing the long game, quietly getting their people into key positions and pushing for more state-controlled internet architecture.
So think about the strategy here. It's kind of brilliant. Why bother arguing in some committee when you can just pass a law at home that basically forces the rest of the world to play by your rules? That's exactly what Europe did with GDPR. By regulating its own massive market, it created a global standard by default. It's a phenomenon people call the Brussels effect. And all of this leads to another massive shift in thinking. The physical nuts and bolts of the internet, they're not just commercial assets anymore. They are now weapons of national power.
For ages, we just saw the cables, the servers, the data centers as business stuff. It was about moving data fast and making money. That whole idea? It's completely out the window now.
And this slide just shows you the change perfectly. All these things, undersea cables, where cloud servers are located, they're now what you'd call dual-use assets. They run our economies, for sure, but they're also potential targets or weapons in a conflict. Being able to control or mess with your enemy's connection, that's a serious military capability.
Okay, so this brings up a really good question. With all this effort, can a country really get total 100% control over the internet inside its own borders?
Well, the reality is, it's messy. Governments want total control, but everyday people have VPNs and strong encryption. States say all our data has to stay here, but big companies find these clever technical ways around it. The source calls this sovereignty theater, and that's a great way to put it. It looks tough on paper, but in practice, people find ways around it.
But, and this is probably the most important thing to get, even if the control isn't perfect, it still changes everything, right? A leaky great firewall is still a great firewall. An imperfect system still raises costs, it still creates barriers, and it still fundamentally splits the network. The fragmentation is real, even if it's got a few holes in it.
So what's the bottom line for all of us? It means the digital map we've all been using our whole lives is being completely redrawn, right now, with new borders and new rules.
For governments, the internet is now a primary stage for global competition, as serious as trade or military strategy.
For businesses, it's becoming this insane maze of conflicting rules, where data that's legal in one country is a liability in another. And for security, well, a splintered internet just creates all kinds of new weak spots.
Ultimately, we're shifting away from the idea of one internet to a new reality of many internets. And the countries that have a clear plan, a real doctrine, they're the ones holding the pen, drawing the new borders. Which leaves a huge question for everyone else. When the dust settles, which side of those new digital lines are you going to be on?